so what do we got to do? We got to go back and say, okay, if we're going to recycle, let's look at the process of recycling. All right, and the most common type of recycling is what we call single stream recycling. Now, single stream recycling is you would take all of your recycled products, put it together in one container. All right, like usually put it in a recycle bin and stuff. All right, and we're going to get into this in great detail. All right, and you'll see right here. So what you're going to do is you're going to take a raw material, and you can make this chart on your own, or you can just put it in your notes. It's up to you. That raw material then is made into a product. That's supposed to be made into a product. Now, very simply, that product is then used. Now, when you're done using it, you have two choices. If you're going to keep it, all right, on a single stream waste, you're going to dispose of it. It's over. Or, when you're done using it, you then collect it. This is why you put recycle bins out on the street, so they can come and collect it. That's supposed to be collection. Then, once you collect it, because it's single stream, all right, because all the the materials are mixed together, so this particular product is mixed in with many other types of recycled materials, like plastics and glass and paper is all mixed together. You then have to sort it, which is a special step in the process. Okay? And then once it's sorted into its individual components, you can take like the glass and remelt it down. We just call this reprocessing. So you reprocess it, oops, and then make it back into raw material, which can be used again to make into another product. Okay, so that's the recycling loop, very simply. But the key is, and what people forget, is there's a collection and a sorting part to the recycling process, and this becomes very labor intensive, very energy intensive. This is the problem with recycling. This is why it's expensive, because you have to spend money to do those things. So, what most people don't understand is that when you put materials out on the curbside, or a better example would be if you go to a Save Recycling Day and drop off your materials, all right, to be recycled, you have to understand that you are not recycling. We call it Recycling Day because that's what people think it is, and that's kind of what the process is. But technically, a Save Recycling Day is really a Save Collection Day. It's only one step in this process. Those materials will then be sorted. For example, the different types of scrap metal will be sorted from each other. Now, some of the stuff is already pre-sorted, so that kind of helps. We kind of do these steps together, and that's sometimes very useful. All right, it reduces the cost. But then those materials will be reprocessed, made into a raw material, and then made into another product. So what you have to do to truly recycle is have your product, use your product, take it to a Save Recycling Day, let Save make it back, or not Save, let somebody make it back into a new raw material, which is then made into a new product, which you then buy again. You have to buy recycled in order to complete the loop. So you aren't truly recycling until you finish the loop by buying recycled materials. So keep that in mind. All right, the first step I said are the types of collections. So let's take a look at them very quickly. There are three types. All right, these are types of collections. The first type is called a drop-off. And this is where you take your materials to a specified location to drop them off. For example, Christmas trees are dropped off at Franconia Township Park. It could be our Recycling Day is a drop-off collection program. You could have bins behind your township building or at a particular location where you drop off your materials. Okay. Now, drop-offs are very easy because it's pre-sorted, but unfortunately your participation rate is very low. Usually less than 10% of your population ever uses a drop-off. So the participation rate is very low. The second type, to increase your participation rate, you can use a drop-off program with a special twist, and that is something called a buyback, where it's a drop-off collection program where you drop off your recyclables, but somebody's going to buy those recyclables back from you. So these are done with the more valuable recycled materials, for example, aluminum cans or scrap metal, okay, where you get some money back as incentive to recycle. And then, of course, the famous one is the states that have the bottle laws, where you have to pay an extra 5 cents for your bottle, but then when you take it back, you get your 5 cents back. That's a buyback program. So now you're talking a participation rate maybe of 15 to 20%. A little bit higher. That's a little bit better. But again, it's not convenient. The incentive is you get money. So the third one, the most convenient, is called curbside. Unfortunately, it's also the most expensive. It's the most convenient for the customer, most difficult for the collector. All right, and that's when a truck comes to your house and picks up your materials and stuff. Okay, so the three types of programs. Curbside has the highest participation rate, by the way. It's somewhere around 80% of the population will actually participate in curbside recycling if you offer it in your town. Okay, so let's try moving on. All right, so collection is, first of all, the first step is to put your materials out. You could have all different types of collections where you have your typical single stream where you have a recycle bin sitting out, or in many cities and towns you already have a kind of a drop-off where you actually separate out your materials. Okay, where in the case of the bottom here you have paper on the right, you have plastic in the middle, and then cans on the left. Okay, and of course, to try to increase interest, you do all kinds of stuff as you see in the upper right. Okay, but the key is you got to get those materials to a recycling center. All right, to a sorting center to be recycled any way you can. All right, most common way though is with the recycling truck. So now what do you do? Once your stuff is collected, the next step is to sort it. So it's collected on this truck. The truck goes to a sorting facility. All right, and those sorting facilities are given a name. A lot of times they're called MRFs. And that stands for Materials Recovery Facility. This is where they're going to take your materials and sort them. This is usually single stream, meaning that everything's mixed together. Okay? It's all commingled. Sometimes, by the way, single stream is called commingled. It's called commingled, where everything's put together. Okay? But it's going to go to a MRF. All right, and at the MRF, you're going to see how the materials actually get sorted, which is the next step of the recycling process. All right, so in this particular case, the materials get dumped there. All right, they get put on a large pile, all mixed together. Okay, they then go to a conveyor belt, and the conveyor belt will take them up. Usually, it's up a little bit higher to a group of people who hand sort out the materials. All right, they'll pull out the trash first, and then they usually hand sort the rest. Okay, this is why it's so labor intensive. It's so expensive to do. All right, you literally have to hand separate everything. Then this also makes it difficult because they don't have time, for example, to read the numbers on the bottom of plastic containers. So the only ones they're going to recycle are the ones they're familiar with, and they don't want to make a mistake. Because plastics all melt at different temperatures, they can't make a mistake. So they're going to do just the obvious. Soda bottles, number one. Water bottles, number one. All right. Milk containers or the gallon jugs, number twos. Detergents, number twos. And pretty much everything else is going to get through. All right. They just don't have the time when you have a conveyor belt constantly going through. Okay. So here's the entire process of sorting out all the different components, starting on the left, working your way through the whole entire process. You don't have to worry too much about that, but you can think of some of these easy ones. For example, it's easy to pull out the steel cans because you can use an electromagnet. Okay, but there are some interesting ones where you pull out things like the plastic from glass, and you could do that simply by air. Plastics are much lighter weight. Have them go across a conveyor belt that have holes in it, and blast air through the holes, and plastic's going to go flying up while the glass is left behind. But still, you have to sort out the different colors, and that becomes very important. But in the end product, you see something like this, where you see the materials get baled into these bales and then stored at this facility until they're ready to be sent off by train or by boat or wherever they can be sold. Okay, so that's basically the sorting process. Then after you sort, you have to reprocess those materials. There will be a company that will reprocess the materials, and then once you're done reprocessing, you can make them into new products and then to be sold in the future. Okay, so let's take a look at the plastic recycling here. All right, there are other ways, more advanced ways. In this case, we're looking at just 1 and 2s. All right, but they're going to be separating out the other types of plastics. All right, and then go to a new process called optical sorting, which is a new technique where they use light visibility and the transparency of the material, with number 1s being more transparent, number 2 being more translucent. And by doing that, they can literally separate out the 2 different types of plastics. And we'll take a look at a video. Then once you separate the 2 different types of plastics, you can then grind them up, clean them, and decontaminate them, put them in the proper piles, and then they get shipped off to be made into new products. So here is plastic number 1 being shredded into a small fine flakes, which are then melted and turned back into pellets through this entire process, where they clean and create these little pellets. All right, and the pellets then, as you see here, can now be used and to make a new product. All right, so it's, in this case, they were dyed blue in the upper right, and they can continue to make blue plastic products. Aluminum can, you have an entire life cycle of aluminum can, starting with the extraction from the earth and going through the process. But what's really interesting with aluminum cans is that once a can is made, used, and then recycled, it could be made right back into a can. It's a perfect closed loop recycling program, and it takes about 60 days, about 2 months, for the can to go on the shelf, be used, be collected, sorted out from all the rest of the recyclables, remelted, remade into a new aluminum can, and put back on the shelf again. That's about the length of the time it takes. All right, and these are aluminum cans coming out of the compactor. Of course, other people have found unusual uses for aluminum cans. Paper recycling. We haven't really talked a lot about paper, but when you take paper, it's a long, again, very energy-intensive process. But you're taking the paper, you're taking it, ripping it, and shredding it, and making it into a pulp. That pulp then is screened, made into screened and compressed into flat sheets, which are then cleaned and brightened, and all the ink is removed, and they're washed, and basically you make paper. So you can see there's quite a polluting process there with paper. But what's interesting is, where does our paper go? And if you take a look at this diagram, you will see that much of our paper goes to 2 different places. First of all, a large percentage, in this case, in our case, 33% is exported, but also a large amount of our paper is made into tissue paper. All right, just something that you might find interesting. It's basically tissue paper or exported to other countries. That's where most of our paper goes. Okay. Now, real quickly, how much can we save by recycling 1 ton? Again, remember, everything's measured by weight. 1 ton of each of the materials. If you steel, you can see it saves a huge amount of energy, gallons of oil. But I want you to take a look at the BTUs, the heat energy, more than anything else on these. All right, steel, you're going to be saving about 10.9 million BTUs of energy per ton of steel. For each ton of recycled plastic, which is a whole lot more plastic than steel by volume because plastic is so light, you can save up to 98 million BTUs of energy. A ton of glass is a little bit different. 714,000 BTUs of energy you can save, along with a lot of other things. A ton of aluminum, okay, is about 238 million BTUs of energy per ton of aluminum. A ton of paper, again, lots and lots of tremendous benefits. Okay, but if you look at the results in general, I want to show you something that will make sense by looking at our recycling rates of different materials. If you remember, I talked about the BTUs of energy. Well, that's where the expense is, creating the BTUs of energy. So the more you can save in BTUs, the less expensive it is. So in this case, it saves 10.6 million BTUs per ton. Okay, that's steel. Plastic per ton is 98 million. A lot better, but that's a lot more plastic. Glass was only 714,000 BTUs, and aluminum was 238 million BTUs. Now look at the two metals. 238 mil, 10.6 million. Okay, BTUs, creating those BTUs of energy is expensive, and so the more you can save, the more valuable recycling becomes. And if you look at it, aluminum is where you save the BTUs. Look at that, 238 million. So aluminum is going to become very valuable. So for aluminum, you get to do a buyback because it saves you so much energy. It's still valuable enough that the companies can pay you for that. All right. But if you look at like glass only saves 714,000 BTUs per ton. So the huge process of collecting, sorting, all right, and all the manual processes that are involved there, and very expensive process, it's really not worth that much. So nobody is trying to, on a large scale, recycle glass. It doesn't have the value. Plastics could have the value because it's 98 million BTUs per ton, but a ton of plastic is just so much plastic. And there's all the sorting and all of the hand labor. It's very difficult. So the two which you get the most value from are steel and aluminum. Therefore, they are the most recycled. And that is your little lesson on the background of recycling. Thank you.